What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Two Worlds podcast. And with me tonight is the Fandral and Hogan to my Volstagg. It's Casey and our first ever guest, Drew. So, Drew, welcome.
I'm the first ever guest? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah, we tried to have Mike on one time, but the audio just was terrible.
But then you said that you didn't want to waste the first one on him, and
yes,
I mean that checks
exactly.
out.
You had to get somebody special, and then they weren't available. I was.
We are very happy to have you. How has your week been?
It's been good. I long weekend away from work, which was nice. I bought stuff. I bought comics. That's what I did.
What'd you pick up?
I genuinely. Oh, I think I honestly can't remember, but like I bought since it was Labor Day weekend, there was a Labor Day weekend sale, so I bought some trades. And one that like people have been telling me to read forever. I got the first volume of Harrow County.
Sure.
By Cullen Bunn, and I can't remember the artist on that, but I've heard good things about it, and so I'm excited to dive into that.
Excellent. Well, just so everybody knows, Drew is a friend of mine through my comic book shop, Comic Headquarters. He's been coming there.
Telegraph Road?
On Telegraph Road.
In St. Louis, Illinois? Or Missouri? Not Illinois?
Yeah, St. Louis,
Illinois.
But he was shopping there before I owned it, and I'm very glad that he continued to shop there because I like him as a person quite a bit. We have a lot of good conversations every week about the books that we read, and Drew has a very good taste in comics, which is why I wanted him on this show. So
just don't get me started on my taste in Star Wars, because then we'll just argue.
Not necessarily. Casey's not a big Star Wars guy either.
Yeah.
I love Star Wars. Just we like different movies.
That is true. That is true. But before we get into Drew phrasing, but
yeah, I was gonna say this is going a lot different than I expected.
We will of course talk about the news of the week. I might have one or two more than Casey, so I will go first. So Ben Kingsley is going to return as Trevor Slattery for the Wonder Man series on Disney Plus. Casey, any thoughts on that?
I mean, he's funny. It's just a waste of Ben Kingsley.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Drew, and any opinion on that?
I don't know that I would say it's a waste of Ben Kingsley, because I don't really know what Ben Kingsley is up to these days. It seems to me that he was Gandhi, and then he was in Iron Man 3, and like that's what I remember about Ben Kingsley.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think he's an interesting character. I thought it was cool that they brought him back for Shang-Chi. I don't know. Same thing. Like, he's funny. It's a funny character. I hope to see more of him with that little animal thing from Shang-Chi, whose name I can't remember.
And I wouldn't know because I have not seen it.
Well, spoiler alert. He's in it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things though where it's like when he was the villain in Iron Man, he's awesome. And then like it just becomes the comedy character. It's like I just want him to be like the awesome villain instead. I just think that's more suited to him.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're not going to get that. So
I know.
We don't know. What if
that's true?
What if he is like a huge villain again, in Wonder Man.
He's like, psych on the psych, I'm still a villain.
Well, it's this time it's going to be like Hollywood related because he's an actor and Wonder Man's an actor, so it's gonna be like a child pedophile ring or something. Just that's what they're doing for Wonder Man.
They're gonna do the Adventures of Wonder Man and Pizzagate.
There we go. Perfect.
Man, I've never really read like a core Avengers title, but I definitely wasn't reading it when Wonder Man was a big part of that team.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like Marvel characters, I know next to nothing about Wonder Man.
It doesn't help that he has got such a weird, like, crazy power structure because like I've seen so many different versions, and then I'm in the same boat as you. I've not read a lot of them, and then it's also like different, like he's died hundreds of times or whatever and all that stuff. So
Sorry, go ahead.
The one thing that I know about Wonder Man is that like his personality was what like made the Vision's personality. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And so like my I don't read a ton of Marvel, but like the everything I know about the Vision comes from the Tom King Vision run. And I thought I thought there was a cool spin on the character in that, where like they see each other as brothers, and he's like he's the uncle to like Vision's constructed kids. I thought that was a cool dynamic, and I feel like we won't get that in the show.
Oh yeah,
because Vision's already been a thing. So
right.
I don't know if they can somehow find a way to connect it, then I think that would be cool. But I think at this point it would seem like a retcon of Vision. Or maybe it'll be a new Vision.
Yeah, that's true. We don't really know what's going on with him right now. So
yeah.
All right. Casey, you want to take one?
Yeah. So I think this is going to make you happy, Jake. Taika Waititi sounds like he's probably not going to return to Thor after the critical reception of Love and Thunder. So how happy does that make you?
It does make me happy, but I feel like whoever takes his place, Marvel's going to tell them to, keep it funny. So
yeah.
I would rather just not have another Thor movie if it's going to be anywhere close to the absolute dumpster fire that Love and Thunder was.
Still haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, you're not missing much. Drew,
Yeah.
did you watch it, and did you like it?
I saw it. I liked it, but I definitely had like more issues with it than I did. Like I know how you feel about Ragnarok. I really like Ragnarok. And I think a lot of that is because I like Taika Waititi as a filmmaker, and so I saw it as like more of just one of his movies versus a Thor movie. But I also think that there are a lot of moments in Ragnarok that work really well, that maybe just have like a lighthearted spin on them. In Love and Thunder, I think there's a lot. It left a lot to be desired. I didn't hate it, but at the same time, like when I left, I didn't feel like, oh hell yeah, I want to go see another Thor movie right now. As for him like leaving, I'm okay with that. I kind of agree with you that I think that like Marvel's probably going to tell whoever comes in next to do the same tone. But maybe they won't. Who knows? Maybe they'll do something new.
Yeah, I mean, it might just depend on if they can get like a good director that they, like how like Sam Raimi got Doctor Strange. If they do the same thing with Thor, if like a director is like, oh, I want to do Thor, and it's like Martin Scorsese's like, I want to do Thor, they're not going to tell him, to Taika Waititi it up. So it just depends on who they get.
They get Peter Jackson to come in and do Thor.
I think you made Jake so happy, Pete, a little.
Dude, I would love that, but it would be probably like a 5-hour movie. Let's be real.
And you'd see it opening night.
Oh, I would. Yeah. And I'd probably really enjoy it.
And then it ends up being like Thor, but the Frighteners.
Oh man. I mean, at this point, I feel like giving a new spin on the character isn't such a bad idea. But Anywho, moving right along. Did you guys hear on like social media this last week the drama around the Kyle Rayner Hispanic month cover? Did you guys see this?
Yeah, it was
I
like,
did, yeah.
wasn't it
All right,
all the
so-
Hispanic, like people were mad about all the Hispanic heritage ones, but like Kyle's was like
But this one
copyright.
was pretty rough. So for those that don't know, DC is doing like a Hispanic Heritage Month with their variant covers, which is nothing new. But the one by Jorge Molina, which featured Kyle Rayner, Green Lantern, got changed quite a bit. And I don't understand why it was even changed to begin with, because the original was a gorgeous cover. I'm sure you guys saw it since you're familiar with this, but DC changed it to have Kyle standing there with like a bag of tamales in his hand. And it was just all sorts of, it was funny, but not in the right way. Like it was terrible, just absolutely terrible. Since that story dropped, this was for Titans United Blood Pact #1. But since all this has come out, DC has decided that they're going to release the original one that Molina did, which just is all around better anyway. So I'm glad that they did that, but also it shouldn't have got to that point.
Yeah.
So
it's just all of them had food too. That's why I think it's funny with each of the covers. They're like, this is what Hispanic people are to us. It's the tacos.
Right. That's basically what they said. It was terrible.
So like, as for the like why that original cover got changed, I don't know how true this is. I did say Jorge Molina basically said like the original cover was never approved and it wasn't supposed to be released to the public. Like nobody was supposed to see it because DC never approved it. And I read somewhere, I don't remember where, and I have no idea if it's like corroborated or if it was just like speculation or whatever, but it's because the original one is like a riff on a famous painting. I can't remember the name of the painting. But apparently like that painting is adherent to very specific copyright laws in Mexico. And so DC did not have the permission to do that cover because of the similarities to the original painting. At some point they must have gotten them because obviously it's being released as the standard cover now. So I think that's why the change happened. But yeah, the change was like just, you know, it wasn't good. and Jorge Molina expressed that he felt it wasn't good in so many words. You know, I think his tweet was like, only one of these has my signature on it, and that's all you need to know.
Right. A very diplomatic approach to it for sure. Okay, Casey.
Yeah, so there's been a whole bunch of scoopers out there like talking that Ben and Henry Cavill are both going to be back as Batman Superman. They're saying it's for sure going to happen, more than just like little cameos. Like we might even see a new Batman movie and a new Superman movie. So some people are saying take that with a grain of salt, but others are like, this is for sure happening.
I mean, I definitely, as we say almost every week on this show, we want another Henry Cavill Superman movie. I don't really have thoughts too much one way or the other about another Affleck a Affleck Batman movie, but I don't know why they do that if they're going to be pushing oh my gosh, him,
Keaton.
the other guy. No, the other one.
Oh, Pattinson.
Yes, Robert Pattinson. His movies.
Different universes.
I know it is, but that everybody complains about, you know, the DC movies don't make sense, which whatever, but that's not going to help.
Yeah, I mean, having those movies and Joker in general aren't going to help though, because they're so different than the more comic booky style they want to do for the other. So, and I don't know. I think that they can easily pull it off because Batman's money. you know. So
Yeah.
I I would love to see a new Henry Cavill Superman movie, like a solo Superman movie with him, with like a good story, good direction. I would love to see that.
mhm.
I do not care to see Ben Affleck as Batman ever again. Uh, Not just because like I thought the movies that he was in were kind of bad, and I didn't like the direction that they did Batman, but I'm just tired of hearing people talk about it.
Mhm.
Genuinely,
That's
uh,
fair.
I spend a lot of time on like on Reddit, and between like the movies subreddit and the Batman subreddit. It's just like people love talking about Ben Affleck. But in my opinion, everything that people love about the Ben Affleck Batman has very little to do with him. Like they say the hallway or the warehouse fight scene. That's the first thing that anyone tends to bring up. And it's a stuntman or CGI. It's mostly CGI. Very little of that is Ben Affleck, and you could just do that with another actor. Like, I don't know, and I say this like as somebody who kind of I like Ben Affleck. I just don't. I think that his probably through no fault of his own. The movies that he was in where he played Batman just left such a bad taste in my mouth that I just don't care. I'm probably never going to care.
That's
That's fine.
100% fair, because I mean, I was about the same way, but then like after I watched the like the extended edition Batman v Superman, I was like, it's not near as bad as the original Batman v Superman. And then like the Snyder cut, I liked him in that. And it's just like I enjoy, like, he does a really good job of balancing Batman and Bruce Wayne, which I like. And like I'm like, if they get a good a good writing and a good director on there, I think he could be an awesome Batman. But I 100% I get having a bad taste, because oh boy, there is some real bad moments for him.
I really think that the only way that you could do like you could really do a good Affleck Batman solo movie is if you just made it very explicitly known that it's the same actor and he looks the same, but you just disregard every movie that came before, because like the character arc of Batman, like it just doesn't it feels so incomplete and unwarranted throughout those movies to me.
Mm-hmm.
Just you would have to just be like, it's different somehow, like, and that's it, and like give them a whole new thing to go through.
Honestly, like the rumors that are out there are kind of like hinting that they're going to try to do like a soft reboot for Affleck and Superman, but keep it the same for Wonder Woman, which, it's like DC's like, we're going to try to reboot this like as easy as possible. So like, they might be trying to do something similar to that when they do this. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah.
It also really annoys me that it takes a director's cut to make me enjoy those more. Like,
Yeah.
the theatrical cut should be good enough to make me
Yeah.
like the
Mhm.
movie, but
I've seen the ultimate cut of Batman versus Superman, and I don't think it makes it a good movie, but it's better only
Mhm.
because there are entire very important plot points and story beats that just get cut
Mhm.
from the theatrical run, and I have no idea why that was the case. I have no idea who made that decision.
Yeah, I agree completely.
It almost feels like that decision was made just to justify a theatric or a director's cut DVD release.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe it was. Okay, so I had this in the news because it was getting late in the week and I had like nothing. But at this point, it's in, so we're going to talk about it. There's going to be a new Beverly Hills Cop movie with Eddie Murphy at Netflix, and it's also going to star Joseph Gordon-Levitt. So are either of you Beverly Hills Cop fans?
I am not.
I've never seen either of the movies.
Oh, there's more than two, Drew.
There's three, right? Yeah,
there's like 3 or 4.
I've never seen any of them, and they've always been on my list of movies that I'm going to watch someday, and I just never have. I know that song though, and that song is good.
Yeah.
So if it makes that song popular again, I welcome it. I'll tell you what I think is really interesting, coming back to Ben Affleck, about there's going to be a connection here. Ben Affleck did that movie Geely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember the guy's name. What was it? Martin. His last name's Brest. Directed Beverly Hills Cop. He also directed Geely, and that's the movie that made him retire.
Wow.
It's a very special movie.
So have you seen Beverly Hills Cop, Jake?
The first one, yeah.
All right. Should the 3 of us just make a Beverly Hills cast where we watch all of the Beverly Hills Cops, Beverly Hills Ninja, and Beverly Hills 90210?
Oh, I've seen Beverly Hills Ninja.
I have too.
I saw that in the theater with my dad.
But I mean, I'm saying do this for the cast though.
Yep. Every Beverly Hills movie.
The entire Beverly Hills verse.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then
Beverly Hills, the Beverly Hills Cop series, Beverly Hills Ninja. You said 90210.
Yep.
Also,
yeah.
The Weezer song Beverly Hills.
Oh yeah. How could I forget?
Casey is a massive Weezer fan, so
it's part of it now. You'd have to get Rivers Cuomo on the podcast as a guest.
I'll start tweeting him now.
Okay, and then this is like so minuscule, I'll just throw this in too, but Brendan Gleeson was cast for an unknown role for Joker 2. So I really need to watch Joker one of these days, sooner than later. I'm liking some of these casting choices. I really like Brendan Gleeson as an actor, so I'm curious to see who he's going to be in that movie.
Okay, I know the name, but who is he?
Matt
in Bruges.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens.
I'm number one. I think that's I'll watch anything he's in. I think he's great. I'm going to guess he's playing Penguin.
I can see it.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. You heard it here first, folks.
I don't know if they would. I don't know if they would use Penguin since he was such a big part of the Batman movie, but I also think that like Warner Brothers kind of just isn't really caring who uses what right now. In some ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if he's playing like a mob boss, that would be cool. Maybe he gets like a solo song, since it's a musical.
Right.
We can dream.
I think that's a really cool idea. Like I don't know. I've talked to some of the kids I teach, and they've brought it up, just like, why would they make it a musical? And I'm just like, I think that's kind of interesting. It got people talking about it.
Yeah, it did. I mean, Lady Gaga's Harley Quinn. I mean, she's obviously a successful artist and might be able to bring something to the movie. Who knows?
And I wonder if they're going to go like the route of like Joker was it was just like a spin on classic Scorsese movies. So like maybe this is a spin on classic musicals.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, you think they'll single one out, or you think it'll just be in general?
Probably, I mean, just in general. That's what it feels like. You know, if they were going to like continue that same kind of like formula from the first one, you know, just borrow from here and there, maybe a few like big ones, and then maybe they do like the third movie borrows from some other genre.
Yeah.
Third one's going to be a silent film. That's
I think that would work for sure.
Maybe the third one they'll borrow from Marvel movies.
There you go. They'll get Taika Waititi to direct it.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Okay, so we got a Agatha Harkness TV show rumor, which I think is the show Jake's most excited about. It's gonna get Nico Minoru from The Runaways. She's supposed to be in it, which it's like I kind of hope she is, because I watched a couple episodes of The Runaways and I love the comics so much. And it's like it would be such an easy thing to adapt, and they did such a bad job, but they did such a good job of casting. So I'm like, at least I'm hoping she's in this and she gets to play Nico well, because it was terrible in the show.
Is that the girl with the staff?
Yep.
Okay. I clearly don't know anything about Runaways.
You should. Have you read Runaways? You should read
No.
it. It's really good.
Yeah. It's
It's like
one of Casey's favorites, and he's tried to get me to over the years.
yeah, like that the Brian K. Vaughan written run is great. I haven't read anything after that, but
like Rainbow, like Joss Whedon took over for a little bit and it was fine, but then when Rainbow took it over, she was a fan of Brian K. Vaughan's run, so she kind of like kept going with his stuff, but everything in between that's just kind of like you're fine missing it.
yeah, that's kind of what I've heard about it. But I mean, those, it's like what, like 6 or 7 trade paperbacks.
Yeah,
It's a lot.
The Vaughn run, and they go really quickly because they're just like really fun reads. And I kind of felt the same way that you did about the show. Like I watched the first season, and I thought it was kind of just okay. It didn't keep my interest the way that the book did, but I did like the casting of all the characters quite a bit.
But it's like with the show, there's so many different things like the comic sets up and like kind of like builds to like Molly's powers. Like you don't know Molly has superpowers until like the 3rd issue or 4th issue, and then the show, it's like first episode she moves a car. You're like, oh, yeah, you're ruining things right off the bat. Okay.
All right. So I don't know if you guys saw these wacky rumors, but there are rumors going around that Todd McFarlane is taking over DC Comics.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, so he's publishing some DC Comics to go with his toy line. The toys are called Page Punchers. But then there's one for like the Flash and Injustice. I think there was another one or two I'm blanking on. Oh, Black Adam. And I think that's it. So, people are thinking that with like the shakeups going on, DC, that Todd might just take over everything. So
that'd be interesting.
Are the comics that come with those toys, are those original stories or are those reprints?
I don't know. I couldn't find out whenever I was looking into this.
I just assumed that they were some reprint, because like stuff that Marvel used to do with like the Toy Biz stuff back in the day.
Right. I mean, I would have assumed so as well, but I couldn't find like a writer or an artist or anything on it. And like they show, well, let's see, for Black Adam, the cover shows Scott
I've seen that one,
and
yeah.
Kirkham. So I'm not sure which Scott they're talking about there, but yeah, I don't know the answer. But I don't think that is a thing. Like I know that Todd puts out all the the DC Direct stuff and whatever, but I really don't think that he has the time, to be honest. I mean, he's too busy running a millions of dollars toy company. So I don't think he's going to take over DC Comics.
Yeah, I doubt that too. But my last bit of rumors, I'm not buying this, because like with the people that they say might be playing it, I'm not buying this. But apparently Disney's gonna announce at D23 that John Boyega, Henry Cavill, Giancarlo Esposito, John Krasinski, Jodie Comer, I don't know, and Denzel Washington will be coming to the MCU. Jodie and John are going to be Mr. and Mrs. Fantastic. Henry Cavill is going to be Hyperion. Giancarlo Esposito, Professor X. Denzel Washington is going to be Magneto or Blue Marvel, and John Boyega is going to be Cyclops. And I'm personally not buying any of that because all the X-Men characters, I don't think they can announce anyone who's going to be an X-Men until the contracts are up for the old ones. I think that's something that was actually stated already. So I don't think that's a thing at all. But yeah, I mean, and then there's been already debunkings of the John Krasinski playing Mr. Fantastic because he's too busy. So I don't know.
I think if any of those hold any water, it's probably Jodie Comer playing. You said it was Invisible Woman, right? Sue Storm. Yeah. I mean, only because I can't see somebody like Denzel Washington like coming to the MCU. Maybe his son. I could see his son having a role in the MCU, but like him, I don't know. It seems to me that he probably is wanting to focus more on like dramas or just straight up action flicks these days.
Yeah, I could see him doing like a one-off for the MCU, just like as a Chadwick Boseman thing, since he was very close to him.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the only way I could see that ever being a thing. But people are convinced he's going to be Magneto.
I've seen that rumor before, and I mean, I don't know. I think that Marvel has a real pickle on their hands with casting Magneto in general, because we're so far removed from World War II that like to keep that story intact, you would have to do some kind of like, oh, he's a mutant, so he ages slowly kind of thing. And if that's the case, why not use somebody younger? Because then you can use them for more time. Or just, you know, have to accept that like Magneto is super old now.
Well, my one thought with Magneto, what they could do, you know, with the make it so the Holocaust still happens for him, is King the Conqueror is going to be a thing. You got time travel then, and just have him fall through the time travel cracks or whatever. I mean,
that's possible too, but I almost think that like kind of, I don't know, like the idea that like you survived the Holocaust and then have to live this entire time with that, like that's more compelling of a character than just like, oh, it was yesterday that you were, you know, escaping from a concentration camp, or, you know, like it was, yes, you know, you left you survived the Holocaust, and then like a couple years go by, and you know, it was like the I think that it took a lot of the wind out of the sails of like the motivation for Thanos in Endgame, because he kind of wasn't the same Thanos that, you know, because of like timey-wimey stuff. He's not the same Thanos that you know, snapped everybody and stuff like that. And it almost kind of in some way, like, yeah, he has that potential, but he didn't have that. And I don't want to see that happen to Magneto, that like he loses out on years and years and years of you know, backstory development.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we'll know very soon if that has any merit, because that's coming up really soon, isn't it?
I think it's this week or next week.
Yeah.
D23.
Yeah,
it's definitely like soon. I don't know exactly when. And then like they also have Disney Plus Day, which is like, that's a different day, right?
I honestly have no idea.
So I mean, yeah, there's going to be a bunch of announcements
right
soon.
All right, our final bit of news, Casey and I both wrote it in the notes, but DC canceled Fandom this year. They put out a statement. Yep.
I didn't know that.
they put out a statement saying it's because more in-person events are happening again, and they'll just save big announcements for that. But I mean, with the recent merger and them like axing everything, I think that's just kind of part of all that, and that's their excuse for it, really. It's a shame because I think fandom was super cool, but whatever.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but like I'm gonna say it anyway. They released that teaser trailer for that Justice League video game I wrote. So like I wrote a Justice League video game. It's coming out sometime next year. That's really all I know about it. But when I was still kind of in contact with the development team on that, they were like, yeah, fandom is like when we're going to start getting details for it. So now I have no idea like what's going on with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like if they were going to say it's because more in-person events are happening, then they should have had some stuff ready for like San Diego. And I know that like New York is still coming up and whatnot, but I don't know. It just kind of feels like a rush excuse in my opinion. But anyway, all right, that's it for the news. So we're gonna take our ad break, and then we'll get more in depth with our guest Drew here. So hang tight, and we'll be right back. All right, so Drew, this is the part of the show that ends up on YouTube where we just kind of shoot the shit about whatever. But okay. Casey, we had a fan comment about the video game ideas last week, so I thought that I would use this time to share that. So this comes from Dan, and Drew, I think you're familiar with Dan at Comic Headquarters. I won't give out his last name, but anyway, he says, my idea for a video game is a Hawkeye first-person shooter game. He says, I would never play it because those games give me motion sickness, but I bet it would be popular, and I'm surprised it doesn't exist already. And, I gotta say, I would play a first-person Hawkeye game. I think that sounds super fun.
I would definitely think about playing one. I just probably would be like, oh, that's $60. I'll wait and then just forget about it.
Any thoughts on that, Drew? Is that a game you'd play?
I probably would. It sounds, I mean, I think the next gen hardware kind of makes for, like PlayStation 5 has the haptic triggers, that would be interesting for like shooting bows and arrows and stuff.
Absolutely.
I also think Hawkeye you could do a lot with kind of like, I mean, they did this in the show, but it's also in the Matt Fraction and David Asia Hawkeye run that like there would be levels where his hearing aids don't work and you would have to, you suddenly can't rely on sound. That would be really interesting.
Mm-hmm. It would be. I didn't think about that.
I think that would add like a kind of a fun dynamic to like certain areas. You could do there's a lot that you could do. I mean, imagine like a sort of like a slowdown mode or like a like bullet time, it used to be called, where you have to line up specific like ricochet shots and stuff like that.
Oh,
that would be cool.
Yeah, Drew, I know that you are a gamer. The question last week was right. The question last week was, what are some like comic book characters that haven't been in or had their own video game that you would like to see? So is there one that sticks out for you?
I mean, the first one that sticks out for me, and I know that he's had video games, but like he hasn't had particularly good ones, is like Superman. A Superman game would be a lot of fun just to be able to fly around the city, and if it was a big open world, kind of like what they did with Spider-Man, that would be a lot of fun. Or like Arkham City, instead of like gliding through the city, now you can just fly through it. I don't know what I don't know how they would deal with like powers, because I mean, you'd have to have you would either just not address it all at all, or have to have an in-game reason why Superman is like not just destroying everything whenever he has to fight something.
It could be like one of the villains messes with the sun or something like that,
Yeah,
so he's
yeah.
not as
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah, maybe it's like Majora's Mask, and there's just like a timer where like when that timer runs out, he doesn't have powers anymore.
Yeah, I like that.
Kind of like a almost like a 0 hour sort of event.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Superman would be a great one. Maybe, just maybe, not at Fandom, but maybe someday you'll hear something about something like that. And I really think I'm trying to think of like Marvel characters, because like I don't want to I don't want to lean too heavy on the DC side. They do a lot of X-Men stuff that's like the most of the X-Men stuff I know of are like, side scrollers from the 90s, or the like fighting games like Children of the Atom and stuff like that. I know they did I guess it was Marvel wide. It was the Ultimate Alliance games, and people really liked those. But like something that's more like an X-Men, team game, that's just like a 3D action adventure game, I think would be a lot of fun.
They had one that was, I think it was like PlayStation 2 and GameCube. It was X-Men Legends, but
They had
Oh yeah,
two
I
of
forgot about
those.
that game.
yeah, but I see what you're saying, where like one on today's systems would be obviously way better. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like Guardians of the Galaxy was kind of a fun game. I thought it was a little too short personally, but it if you get like that style of gameplay, maybe you just play as one singular character, but you have everybody else there with you to kind of team up and stuff like that. Or you kind of do what they did with the newer Final Fantasy games, where again you kind of control one character, but you can change from to different people in combat or something like that.
right,
That'd be kind of cool.
absolutely. All right. Well, folks, thanks for listening to the ad. As always, we've got a little YouTube exclusive over on the YouTube channel. It's Two Worlds Podcast on YouTube, where we all talk about video games, and we extend our video game question that we had last week to Drew, and he gives us some cool ideas about that. So moving on, Drew, I sort of gave you a couple things that we were going to ask you, so it wasn't just on the spot. If you're like me, if somebody's like, what's your favorite comic, I can't think of a single comic book I've ever read. But I did ask for a top 5 favorite comic series of all time according to Drew, so
Okay,
let's hear it.
and so I did think about that, and it was tough. So I'm not really, these aren't really going to be in order, but they're going to seem incredibly cliche too. My favorite comic series of all time is Sandman. That 75 issue run, and then like the couple specials they did, to me that's like the pinnacle of storytelling. It's my favorite piece of fiction regardless of medium. And I mean, I love Sandman. I could talk about it forever, and I have, and I will continue to do so. I think Dark Knight Returns is really important to me. And I have a lot of thoughts on Dark Knight Returns, just because it's like, I don't think that people should really think of that as a Batman story per se, more like it's just a story that uses Batman as the device to tell the story. And so like, to me, I think it's more interesting when you read Dark Knight Returns that way versus just seeing it as like another Batman story. And I think whenever people do think of it as just like another Batman story, they tend to kind of just be like, okay, why is this so great? You know? But I think that Dark Knight Returns is still immensely interesting to pay attention to, and to like kind of deconstruct what's going on in the panels, and like analyze how Frank Miller was incorporating the different like literary devices visually. I think that book's incredible whenever you think of it that way. I have to say Watchmen. Watchmen is just, it's so good. Everything, I mean, everyone said everything that needs to be said about Watchmen, but I'll still sing its praises all the time. I teach Watchmen in my senior level English class, and every time I read it, I find something new that I've never noticed before. Non-superhero book, I guess Sandman's not really a superhero book, but you know, this one is definitely not a superhero book. Scalped, the Vertigo book, is my favorite crime series ever. Jason Aaron wrote it, art by R.M. Guerra, with a few guest artists here and there. It is incredible. And it kind of flies under the radar, especially now because it doesn't seem like DC is reprinting it. So it's like, it's a Vertigo series. It is a hard-boiled crime series. The best way to describe it is it's HBO's The Wire, but instead of taking place in Baltimore, it takes place on a Native American reservation in South Dakota. It's fantastic. It is some of the most heartbreaking stories I've ever read. Culturally relevant. I think it's a very important landmark in the medium of comics, and I wish more people read it because I want to talk to people about it all the time. But I also kind of like that people haven't read it, because then I get to recommend them something new. It's one of those books that I wish that I constantly wish that I could read for the first time again. And that's 4. 5. Ooh, that's a really good one. I got to think about what number 5 would be, because like at this point, like the stuff that I was thinking about is kind of gone from my head, and I'm with you now. I can't think of a single comic book that I've read.
I mean, that's okay. If you know, you gave us a really solid 4. So
I think you know what? I'll go again, kind of a cliche. You know what? Actually, I'm going to break the cliche. I was going to say Preacher. But I'm going to say a book that's just about to finish up, Deadly Class. Rick Remender and Wes Craig. I've been reading that book since issue 1 dropped. It is about to finish. The next issue that comes out is the final issue. So later this month, that book's going to end. And I think it's been 8 years since the first issue came out, something like that. And it is, I mean, if you've never read a book that Wes Craig has done the art on, he is incredibly creative with how he like lays out some of his pages. There are pages that like where there's just repeating panels, but he skews them in such a way that it looks like, you know, you're obviously looking at a 2-dimensional page, but it looks like it has the entire page has turned. Super cool stuff. And then like me being a guy who grew up listening to like punk rock and hardcore punk bands and stuff like that, it just spoke to me in such a way that, like, yeah, it's a story about a group of kids who go to the school that teaches them to be the next generation of the world's greatest assassins. But it's also about kids who like go see punk rock bands. They sneak out of that school and they go see the Adolescents in one issue. And a lot of times when writers try to include like subcultures of any kind, really, but especially punk, because like that's what I'm deeply familiar with, they do it in a way that's just like weird and wrong. Like they saw an episode of Full House where somebody wore a leather jacket and Danny Tanner was mad about it, and then like that's what they based their entire opinion of punk on. Just like a series of cliches, and just like, but this one actually feels like it was written by people who experienced that. And I've heard Rick Remender talk about his experiences coming up in that scene, and it rings true. Even stuff I've been in punk bands since I was 13 years old, and I mean even though this story mostly takes place in the 80s, it still is touching on stuff that like rings true to me because I've experienced that type of stuff.
Right on. Well, thank you for sharing your favorites there. Definitely a solid lineup. I also asked about maybe 3 of your least favorite comic books.
Okay. My number one least favorite comic book that I've ever read in the history of my time reading comics is, I don't want to say it. I don't want to harp on it because he just recently died, but Neil Adams' Batman Odyssey. It's so bad. It's like unbelievably bad. It's like, it's the first issue of the book feels like you're reading a bunch of like continuations of stories, but you didn't read the stuff leading up to it, and it just kind of like jumps from thing to thing, from idea to idea, without necessarily tying them all together or anything. It's hard to read, and it's like it's framed in a weird way. Like there's a framing device that Batman is telling Alfred a story about a time he told Tim Drake a story. So already it's confusing because you don't know who's who, and like you don't know which story is the story he's telling and which story is the story he's telling the story of telling. And it's like a whole thing about like why Batman doesn't use guns, but also like Man-Bat is there attacking while Batman's trying to tell this story. Ra's al Ghul is there. There's a thing about a train. I don't remember. I just remember that it was like this weird, like garbled mess that was just kind of like thrown into a blender. The game, it reads like a game of Yahtzee. That's what it is. They took a bunch of ideas and threw them in a cup, shook it up, and then threw them all out, and then said, "There it is. That's the story." And it's just it's not fun to read. It's not even bad in a fun way.
Right. I haven't read that, but I tried to read his Dead Man that came out a couple years ago, and it was the same thing, dude. By the end, I mean, I just had no idea what was going on the whole time.
Yeah, it's rough. That was the first book, I think, because it came out like relatively early into my like seriously reading comics career, I guess. And I think that it was the first book that I was just like, I'm just never going to finish this, and actually had to drop it from my pull list. And I was so excited about it because, like, you know, Neil Adams coming back to Batman was like a cool thing.
Right.
Yeah, and it just wasn't fun.
Did you ever read that one, Casey?
I think I read the first issue and then I was like, I'm not doing this again.
It's like it's that story, like that first issue, and I think I read like 3 issues after that. It's like my mom telling me a story about a thing that she remembered once. Like that's what it is. Like there's all these weird tangents, nothing makes sense, but then like she's gonna tell me all about like a lot of detail that just doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
And then by the end I'm gonna be like, you were telling me a story about somebody at the hospital where you work. How did we get to Peru?
Right on.
If I had to pick another bottom one, I really hate The Boys. I've read like the first 7 issues of it. I remember whenever I first started reading comics, like The Boys was pretty popular, and it had won awards at that point, like or at least it was nominated for like Eisners. The I feel like whenever you first get into comics, the idea of like stuff, a series that kind of pokes fun at superheroes is a little bit more appealing than like when you've been around for a while, because like now that's every publisher has a story like that. But when you first get into it, it's kind of like, oh, that's an interesting take on things. So I found like the first 5 issues of The Boys in a bundle one time when one of my bands was on tour, and I bought them, and the first 5 issues is the first story arc. And this was way before there was going to be a show about it, anything like that. And I really didn't know anything. I hadn't read Preacher yet, so I wasn't familiar with Garth Ennis's work. And I just hated it. I read those first 5 issues and I was just like, this is like, it just felt like it was trying to make me laugh about things that like really aren't things to joke about. And I'm not even really a guy who's just like, oh, there are things you can't joke about, but it just wasn't well done. And it turned all of these very sensitive issues into like punchlines. I mean, anyone who knows me has heard me say it, I'm sure, but I think that the show does that story so much better than the book. And I mean, I'm not the only one who has that opinion. That's a pretty common opinion. But it's true. It just, it tweaks what's in the book enough to make the show a little bit more interesting. And in my opinion, like actually like palatable. And that brings me to my 3rd book, which is one of the books I've read. I read the whole thing in one sitting. I hated it. The movie is better, but it's still not good, in my opinion. Wanted, Mark Millar, J.G. Jones. The movie is an entirely different concept. Have either of you, like, I'm sure you're familiar with the movie. That was really popular.
I've only seen the movie.
Yeah, I've seen the movie.
Have either of you read the book?
No.
Okay, so the concept is entirely different. In the movie, like, you have James McAvoy, Professor X. He's like enlisted. He's like the son of the world's greatest assassin, and he gets picked up by the fraternity of assassins to kind of like, what is it, like, I don't know, do some jobs that he never finished or something like that. That's basically the concept, right? So they give him a bunch of money. They say, hey, quit your job, learn how to curve a bullet, hit Star-Lord in the face with a keyboard, and but the book has nothing to do with assassins at all. He was the son of the world's greatest supervillain, and all of the supervillains effectively defeated and killed all of the world's superheroes, and then did like through like some weird timeline stuff, made the entire world forget that heroes and villains ever existed. And that's an interesting idea for a story. But where it falls apart is that it's just edgy joke after edgy joke after edgy joke. And like, it's all like the development of the characters, interesting storytelling, they're all sacrificed just so they can make some jokes about like about sexual assault. And like, it's just not fun. It's not fun to read. I remember sitting in a Denny's and reading it, and I was just like, this sucks, I'm going to read The Losers instead. That's what I did. I read the first volume of The Losers.
I've not done Wanted. I also didn't make it. I don't think I finished the first volume of The Boys because I thought, wow, this is just the edgiest thing I've ever read, and I don't like it. So
yeah, and I think that there is like, you know, I'm a guy of a certain age who like, I can appreciate good edgy humor. But it's just, you know, good was the operant word there. And I like Preacher a lot. I think Preacher is a really smart book hidden under a bunch of like, you know, immature humor. And you know, I think there's a lot to like about Preacher if you really sit down and analyze it. But maybe that's because Garth Ennis was under other editorial constraints or something like that. I don't know. It's I think that's a really good book. I think everything that you could get from The Boys other than the superhero concept, you could just get in Preacher, and it's a better package.
right on. Well, thank you for sharing all that with us. We decided that we were going to specifically talk about your favorite of all time, which, as you just said, was Sandman. And Casey and I both read volume 1 this week. Casey, if I remember right, you said you'd had read that much before?
Yeah.
Okay. And this was my first read of it. So before we let you tell us why you love it so much, Casey, I just want to ask sort of your general thoughts on that first volume.
It's really, really good. I mean, it's enjoyable. My favorite part's the stuff with the old Destiny. Like that was like from that like same thing when I read it the first time, the second time. It's my favorite. It was crazy. What about you?
I loved it. It was really good. I had just finished the show. So obviously it was pretty similar to that, with just some minor differences. I should say it's written by Neil Gaiman with art by Sam Keith. But yeah, I liked it more than the show because they're able to tie it in more to the DC universe than the show could. And, you know, that's not to take anything away from the show, but obviously if there's a chance that I can see Martian Manhunter or something like that, that's obviously going to make it better for me. But anyway, Drew, why don't you tell us just sort of like, you know, whenever you first read it, do you still feel the same, or do you feel differently between now, like rereading it on whichever read through you may be on it, and that first time you read it? And what is it about this book that just speaks to you?
So I think, first of all, like what makes Sandman so interesting is that I think it's an example of a book that does pull from a bunch of different things. It's not, you know, like it takes place in a superhero universe technically, but it's not a superhero book. And it has horror elements, but it's not just a horror book. And it has like connections to the weirder DC stuff, but it's not a weird DC book, you know, like it has all of these things. And really what it comes down to is it's a story about stories told with like a lot of like existential commentary. It's just every volume of Sandman is a little bit different than the ones that came before it. And there's so much like there was I can remember there's one volume of Sandman in volume 5 that's so wildly different than everything that came before, to the point where I was just like, I don't know if I like this. And then when it was done, I was just like, because like volume 5 is more of like fantasy, like it's fantasy, more so than any of the other volumes that came before. But when it was done, I kind of was like, well, that was different, but I liked how different it was, even if it wasn't my favorite, you know. I think I read Sandman the first time. It's got to be like when I started reading it was like 10 years ago, and I took a long time to read it, because a thing about me is that if I don't have to, I probably won't pay full price for a trade paperback. So I was always waiting until I found one that was like used or on sale or something like that. And so like it took me a long time to finish it. But it's one that I almost think I benefited from for taking so long to read. And that's kind of how I took the show too. Like I didn't binge the show. I watched like an episode a night for a while. It has very dark themes. I mean, you're dealing with like characters who not only like go to hell, but like they're on like first name basis with demons and you know and Lucifer. But it also has a lot of really nice heartfelt moments all throughout. It's the atmosphere of Sandman is crazy. You know, there are like I think it's the 6th issue, is the 24-hour diner issue, which is incredibly dark. And it's one of like, it's not scary in the sense that like when you're reading it, you're feeling like dread or anything like that. You're not feeling like something's gonna pop out at you in your bedroom like when you're reading it late at night or anything like that. But like once you actually think about what is going on with these characters and what's happening to them, like it's objectively terrifying, from a psychological standpoint. But then like a few issues later, there's a story about a dude just like deciding, you know what, I'm never gonna die, you know. And it's like a little whimsical. It's kind of lighthearted, and it just pulls from all these things. If Batman Odyssey is a book that's like, you know, doesn't know what it's doing with all the pieces, Sandman is a book that's like all the puzzle pieces fitting perfectly together in a way that there's no way that it wasn't meticulously planned from the beginning. But at the same time, it ran for 10 years and 75 issues. There's no way it was planned out that way. You know, it's just the creative team. I mean, Neil Gaiman's the mastermind behind it, but I think the different artists that he pulled in all helped to make everything fit together perfectly. And I can honestly say that it is a book that I don't think can be improved. The only thing that I think is a weak part of it is Sam Keith's art. And he recognized that, and he left the book like 3 issues in, and they replaced him with a different artist. And Mike Dringenberg who replaced him fits that book so much better than Sam Keith did.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that a little bit because anytime I see Sam Keith's name or hear his name, I think of the Max, which I'm
Right.
not like a fan of at all. But I wanted to say that like I hate basing how I feel about an artist on like one particular thing, but sometimes I do. But seeing his work in this, I was like, oh, this is actually like I like this, even if it's not like, you know, the best work.
Sam Keith drawing Etrigan the demon in the issue when Morpheus goes to hell is one of the coolest things.
Yeah.
He makes him like dragon like and like, you know, way more of a lizard looking character than anybody else did up to that point or has done since then. And it just looks so good. And like I have the annotated Sandman, which like every single page has some kind of annotation. For the most part, there are some that have none, but like a lot of them go into like the background or even like talk about what's in the script. And like that hell issue is basically just like Neil Gaiman, you know, saying, oh, we got Sam Keith to draw it, well, we have to do demons, you know, like, and he basically just tells Sam Keith, do whatever you want it for the backgrounds and stuff like that. And I you know, playing to his strengths is awesome. And I mean, later you have Kelly Jones does an issue later in the series. A ton of guest artists come in, and I mean, it's so good, and it works so well to showcase all of their strengths.
I really, really like that hell issue. Apart from just seeing all the crazy demons and stuff, the little, you know, the game that Morpheus plays, I thought was just like a smart, fun game. You know, whenever there's a big, you know, duel in hell, that's not the kind of game that I would imagine them playing. But I enjoyed it a lot.
That like you're trying to just kind of one up the previous person with like, you know, something that could defeat what the last person said, you know, and gradually like escalate it. I think that's such a cool idea.
Yeah.
And it brings in a really first of all, it does two things that I like. Number one is that it referenced Jack Kirby, because the demon in the show, they just had it be Lucifer, which I thought was fine, and I think that episode is one of the best. But like, you know, the demon Choronzon in the first book is you know, brings up anti-life. You know, I am anti-life. The idea that like, you know, you are submitting all free will to me, and thus you are not really alive. You know, like it almost seems like, how do you defeat that? And then it brings up this philosophical, that's the second thing that I like. It's a philosophical answer, the idea that you cannot defeat hope. If you have hope, then nothing can defeat it. Which you could argue you could defeat hope. But this idea that if you never lose hope, then nothing else can, you know, you can't succumb to anything, is a very Neil Gaiman idea. You see stuff like that all throughout his novels and stuff like that. But I mean, reading it in a comic when you're mostly used to superhero comics, I mean, for me, that was like a big moment when I was just like, oh, this is a book I have to keep reading.
Sure. So what's your favorite issue from volume 1?
My favorite issue from volume 1, I really like the hell issue, which I think is just called A Hope in Hell. I really like that one. You get to see cool demons. You get that, you know, like existentialist kind of, you know, commentary with the oldest game. It introduces a few things that eventually become other plot points, like, you know, his ex-lover who he like banished to hell. She comes back later and is a big part of volume 4. You also get Lucifer being upset that Morpheus came to hell, and basically saying, hey, if you come back, you're unwelcome and there's going to be repercussions. And that is the basis of volume 4 of the book. So like you get to see, you know, where that goes. It's a really good issue. 24-Hour Diner, I think, is a fantastic, just little, like, even if you just read that without the context of Sandman, that's just a really fun horror short. You know, you have a group of characters who don't really know each other very well, who we later learn actually have connections. Some of them have connections to other characters who will come along. But they're all being manipulated by a person who can control their dreams. And if there was one episode of the show that was kind of a disappointment to me, it was that episode, only because the book goes so much further with how odd and disturbing and like horrifying it actually is. And I think the show gets a little bit tame in that when it gets to that part of the story. So like if you liked the show, go read that issue in the book. But man, like even in saying all that, in my head, I was like, oh, it's down to those two. But then in having this conversation, I remembered that issue 8 is the introduction of Death, and Death is my favorite comic book character ever. And it's just, I mean, it's just a stroll, a brother talking to his sister while she's at work. Essentially, that's the issue. You know, but sure, but her job is very weird. You know.
Yeah.
But I really like the kind of like juxtaposition of, you know, you think of Death as like this solemn character who's very sad, and you know, instead you have this like kind of jaunty, upbeat, you know, girl who comes in and like she shares an intimate moment with somebody before that person's soul is like taken away to wherever it is they're going. You know, I like that idea a lot. The way that Sandman portrays death as a concept is immensely comforting for some reason. As the story goes on, as the book goes on, I mean, that she's a big part of the story. And I mean, it's just it made me feel better about the fact that someday I'm going to die, you know. And I don't think many books can do that.
Yes, the idea that nobody is alone at the moment of their death, you know, is very comforting.
Not just that they're not alone, but like they take it even further, that like death legitimately cares for every living thing, you know. Like she there's an issue late in the series where this guy sees Death, and she makes eye contact with him, and he doesn't know why she's there. She's not there for him, and he doesn't know who she is. He has no idea who she is. He just catches a glimpse of her, and the way he describes it is that like he really wants to go with her, and he doesn't know why, but just in you know, sharing that eye contact with him, he feels like he's in love with this woman, and he's going to be in love with her for the rest of his life, and he cannot for the life of him figure out why. And I think that that's just like such a cool way to think about that you know, weird thing that we all have to deal with eventually.
Right. Yeah, I think that issue probably is my favorite of the series, or the volume. Um it the part with the baby kind of messed me up a little bit, but like in a good way. So it's just like, he or she says, "Oh, that's all I get," and they have like a short conversation. I was like, man, this bums me out, but then I feel better about it afterwards. But
Yeah.
that's not something that you really get in any other book.
There's a there's an issue, I think it's in the third volume. It might be tacked on to the end of the second one, but I don't think so. Um, and I won't say who it is, but like it's a death issue, and it deals with death encountering a character from the larger DC universe who is trying to die and just can't. Um, and when this character sees death, they're like, oh great, it's happening. And Death's kind of just like, I gotta be honest, I'm here for the person down the hallway, but I'll sit and talk with you and just listen to you for a little bit. And it's really nice. And I mean, it's a character that I don't know if it's obscure enough that they could use in the show when they eventually get to that point, but I really hope that they do that in some way. Whether it's just like a regular person or this superhero character. I just really want to see that.
Can I just make one single guess and you tell me if I'm right?
Yes.
Is it Dead Man?
No.
Oh, okay. Casey, you said your favorite issue was the diner.
Yeah, probably the diner.
Yeah, it's awesome. That issue, like, I remember reading that for the first time and just like feeling icky, but in a good way, like,
Yeah, and like he does such a good job of like making kind of like care about each of these characters, and then you're like, oh, this is terrible for them.
But I think what's absolutely great about that is that like he uses their dreams to reveal information to us that we wouldn't normally get. So like there's like a couple who love each other, but like when they when you look into their dreams, like the guy dreams about murdering the wife, like stuff like that. And it's just, you get to really explore like how there's other stuff below what you just normally see, and how every person has some side to them that they don't want you to see, that can only be accessed through dreams, which only like accentuates the power that Morpheus actually has over humanity.
Yeah, I think the one scene from that issue that stuck out the most was she has like his head on a platter or something like that, and it's like, and he'll be hers forever. And it's like it's like, this shouldn't be as nice as it is. It was just really interesting.
If you haven't they Audible did like an audio production of Sandman that follows the book really closely. That issue is that chapter of the audio, people call it an audio book. It's not an audio book. It's an audio drama. It's like a radio show. And that story is particularly fun to listen to because of all the background sound effects and stuff. And Neil Gaiman's narrating it himself. So, you get the kind of the way that he would be telling the story.
Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, Drew, you're not the first person that told me that that volume 1 is like, as good as it is, it's the weakest volume of the series.
It really is. It just gets better from there.
Right, which is very exciting because I really like this volume a whole lot. So it's like, I definitely want to keep reading the rest of it. And I am just such a sucker for the little obscure stuff to the rest of the DCU. So I'm excited to see that whenever I get to it.
Yeah, I mean it's all over the place too. I mean it's not like it, because like when the books first started, when it first started getting published, Vertigo wasn't around yet. It was part of the DC universe, and then the Vertigo imprint was created kind of for Sandman and other books like it. So they started to kind of distance themselves from the larger DCU, but those references are there all throughout it, which is great. I mean, I started reading it at a time when I didn't catch all of those things. Like I didn't know what the House of Mystery and the House of Secrets were. But now that I do know that stuff, it kind of adds an extra layer to that, and then you get like Destiny was, a character in, an old DC anthology host as well. Lucien the Librarian is an old Paul Levitz creation from what was it called? It was called like Weird Ghost Tales or something like that. Like all these old 1960s horror books. Gregory the Gargoyle was created by Bernie Wrightson. Like stuff like that. Just these callbacks to stuff that people didn't think about for years, probably. I mean, the only reason I know the character Prez, the teenage president, is because Prez is a character later in Sandman. Like it's awesome. I'm doing a thing on TikTok right now where I'm breaking, because like people wanted to talk about Sandman, so like I'm breaking down all the different ways that Sandman connects to the larger DC universe, whether it's just like a quick reference or like an entire character who had some big splash or something like that. I mean, people may not know this because it's not in the main Sandman series. It's in the Endless Nights, which is kind of the unofficial 11th volume. One of the characters from Sandman is responsible for the entire DC universe existing as we know it. That's all I'll say about that.
That's quite a big thing.
It's huge, and it's done in such a cool way.
Right on. Whenever Casey and I read stuff like this, I always ask Casey, is this something that you would continue reading?
I mean, after I read just the first trailer, I was like, maybe. But then hearing Drew talk about it now, I'm like, I kind of want to know who wants to kill themselves and like all these other little things. I'm like, kind of want to like, he's building it up really good for me. So probably going to.
Yeah.
It's a thing that like Sandman is so important to me. I've brought it up maybe on 90% of all of the first dates I've had since I started reading it. I've bought people copies of Sandman, just be like of that first volume, just to be like, listen, I don't know if you actually will, but read this. Or like I've lent out my copies so much that like I've lent out my original copies so much that they're tattered and I had to buy new copies. And then I kept finding more new copies. So I kept buying them.
No, that's great. It was a good read, and I kind of, whenever I asked you, the top 5, I kind of thought that this one was going to be right up there at the tippy top. So I'm glad it gave me a reason to check out the first volume, because I've had it for a long time. I just never read it, so it was a very good reason to do so. But Drew, unless there's any final thoughts you'd like to add to that, or Casey, you as well, I think that pretty much brings us to the end of the episode.
The only thing I'm gonna say is look out for that Justice League game when it comes out. I don't make any money if you buy it, just so you know. People think I'm going to plug it, but I'm just really proud of the story that I co-wrote with some people. So that's it.
And we definitely plan on having you back on whenever that game releases, because we want to talk about that a lot more, especially when you're like legally able to do so.
Yeah.
I'm still under NDA, so like I don't even know, like I probably have told you too much, but you know the people who made it,
we don't have a lot of listeners. Don't worry about
paying
it.
All right. So Drew, I mean, is there anything else that you would like to plug, or any of your socials or anything like that? Like, where can people find you if they want to hear some more of your thoughts about Sandman or anything else?
So I use the same username for like all social media, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. I talk a lot more about comics on TikTok than I do really anything else. But it's Drew, my first name, the letter X, and then the word deficit, which, you know, if you don't know how to spell that, figure it out.
All right. Well, Drew, thank you very much for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Nice meeting you, Drew.
Likewise.
Yeah. We'll have lots to talk about the next time as well. And you know, real quick, we'll do our closing plugs. If you guys would, please check us out on Facebook. That's facebook.com/2worldspodcast. On Twitter at 2_worlds_PC, and on Instagram at 2worldspod. And if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel, that's 2 Worlds Podcast on YouTube. And you know, we'd love to stay and chat, but we have to go die unexpectedly to Hela up in Asgard. So we'll talk to you next time. Bye, guys.
Bye.